Welcome back to GCC Kids Connection, where we are connecting with each other while you're home from school. We're connecting with some really cool books, and most importantly, we're connecting with God's Word. We're so glad you're here.
Well, hi kids, welcome back. Hey, I brought along some of my favorite flowers. Springtime is a beautiful time of year. It's my favorite time of year, and I love all the beautiful springtime flowers. You might have some of these in your yard. You know what these are called? These are called tulips, and they're blooming really nicely right now. In fact, they're almost getting to the stage where they're finished. Another early springtime flower that you probably have in your yard is the daffodil. They kind of like just scream springtime. And then this is one of my favorites because it has such a really pretty smell, and it is one of the first flowers to bloom in the springtime. Have those around Easter time, and these are hyacinths. My grandma used to have lots of hyacinths around her house. Well, today we're going to talk about two flowers, or read about two flowers that you might not know. These flowers actually bloom later in the summer, and this one in particular, this is what we commonly call a mum, which is short for the name chrysanthemum. And there are chrysanthemums that bloom in the spring, and then there are some chrysanthemums that bloom in the fall. Today we're going to read about a chrysanthemum. And also in our story, we're going to read about this flower, which I just love. They grow in big, tall stems. They're called delphinium. And I just think they are so pretty. But they are also in our story today. And the title of our book is called Chrysanthemum. And let's find out what chrysanthemum is all about. Love this story. It goes like this. The day she was born was the happiest day of her parents' lives. She was perfect, said her mother. Absolutely, said her father. And she was. She was absolutely perfect. Her name must be everything she is, said her mother. Her name must be absolutely perfect, said her father. And it was. Chrysanthemum. Her parents named her Chrysanthemum. Chrysanthemum grew and grew and grew, and when she was old enough to appreciate it, Chrysanthemum loved her name. She loved the way it sounded when her mother woke her up, and she loved the way it sounded when her father called her for dinner, and she loved the way it sounded when she whispered it to herself in the bathroom mirror. Chrysanthemum, chrysanthemum, chrysanthemum. Chrysanthemum loved the way her name looked when it was written on an envelope, and she loved the way it looked when it was written on her birthday cake. And she loved the way it looked when she wrote it herself with her big fat orange crayon. Chrysanthemum, chrysanthemum, chrysanthemum. Chrysanthemum thought her name was absolutely perfect, and then she started school. On the first day of school, Chrysanthemum wore her sunniest dress with her brightest smile. She ran all the way. Hooray, said Chrysanthemum, school! But when Mrs. Cloud took roll call, everyone giggled upon hearing Chrysanthemum's name. It's so long, said Joe. It scarcely fits on her name tag, said Rita, pointing. I'm named after my grandmother, said Victoria. You're named after a flower. Chrysanthemum wilted. She did not think her name was absolutely perfect. She thought it was absolutely awful. The rest of the day was not much better. During nap time, Victoria raised her hand and informed Mrs. Cloud that Chrysanthemum's name was spelled with 13 letters. That's exactly half as many letters that are in the entire alphabet, Victoria explained. Thank you for sharing that, Rita. Thank you for sharing that with us, Victoria, said Mrs. Chudd. Now put your head down. If I had a name like yours, I'd change it, Victoria said, as the students lined up to go home. I wish I could, thought Chrysanthemum miserably. Welcome home, said her mother. Welcome home, said her father. School is no place for me, said Chrysanthemum. My name is too long. It scarcely fits on my name tag, and I'm named after a flower. "Oh, pish," said her mother. "Your name is beautiful, and precious and priceless and fascinating and winsome," said her father. "It's everything you are," said her mother. "Absolutely perfect," said her father. Chrysanthemum felt much better after her favorite dinner, macaroni and cheese with ketchup, and an evening filled with hugs and kisses and parcheesi. That night, Chrysanthemum dreamed that her name was Jane. It was an extremely pleasant dream. The next morning, Chrysanthemum wore her most comfortable jumper. She walked to school as slowly as she could. She dragged her feet in the dirt. "Chrysanthemum, chrysanthemum, chrysanthemum," she wrote. "She even looks like a flower," said Victoria as Chrysanthemum entered the playground. "Let's pick her," said Rita, pointing. "Let's smell her," said Joe. Chrysanthemum wilted. She did not think her name was absolutely perfect. She thought it was absolutely dreadful. The rest of the day was not much better. During nap time, Victoria raised her hand and said, "A chrysanthemum is a flower. It lives in a garden with worms and other dirty things." "Thank you for sharing that, Victoria," said Miss Chudd. "Now put your head down." "I just cannot believe your name," said Victoria as the students lined up to go home. "Neither can I," thought Chrysanthemum miserably. "Welcome home," said her mother. "Welcome home," said her father. "School is no place for me," said Chrysanthemum. "They said I even look like a flower. They pretended to pick me and smell me." "Oh, pish," said her mother. "They're just jealous." "And envious and begrudging and discontented," said her father. "Who wouldn't be jealous with a name like yours?" said her mother. "After all, it's absolutely perfect," said her father. Chrysanthemum felt a trifle better after her favorite dessert, chocolate cake with buttercream icing, and another evening of hugs and kisses and parcheesi. That night, Chrysanthemum dreamed that she really was a chrysanthemum. She sprouted leaves and petals. Victoria picked her and plucked the leaves and petals one by one until there was nothing left but a scrawny stem. It was the worst nightmare Chrysanthemum had ever had. Chrysanthemum wore her outfit with 7 pockets the next morning. She loaded the pockets with her most prized possessions and her good luck charms. Chrysanthemum took the longest route possible to school. She stopped and stared at every flower. "Chrysanthemum, chrysanthemum, chrysanthemum," the flowers seemed to say. That morning, the students were introduced to Mrs. Twinkle, the music teacher. Her voice was something out of a dream, as was everything else about her. The students were speechless. They thought Mrs. Twinkle was an indescribable wonder. They went out of their way to make a nice impression. Mrs. Twinkle led the students in scales, and then she assigned roles for the class musical. Victoria was chosen as the dainty fairy queen. Rita was chosen as the spiffy butterfly princess. Joe was chosen as the all-important pixie messenger. And Chrysanthemum was chosen to be a daisy. "Chrysanthemum's a daisy! Chrysanthemum's a daisy!" Joe, Rita, and Victoria chanted, thinking that they were wildly funny. Chrysanthemum wilted. She did not think her name was absolutely perfect. She thought it was absolutely dreadful. "What's so humorous?" asked Mrs. Twinkle. "Chrysanthemum," they answered. "Her name is so long," said Joe. "It scarcely fits on her name tag," Rita pointed out. "I'm named after my grandmother," said Victoria. "She's named after a flower." "My name is long," said Mrs. Twinkle. "It is," said Joe. "My name scarcely fits on my name tag," said Mrs. Twinkle. "Really?" Rita said. "And," said Mrs. Twinkle, "I'm named after a flower too." "You are?" asked Victoria. "Yes," said Mrs. Twinkle. "My name is Delphinium. Delphinium Twinkle. And if my baby is a girl, I'm considering Chrysanthemum as a name. I think it's absolutely perfect." Chrysanthemum could scarcely believe her ears. She blushed, she beamed, she bloomed. Chrysanthemum! Chrysanthemum! Joe, Rita, and Victoria looked at Chrysanthemum longingly. "Call me Marigold," said Joe. "I'm Carnation," said Rita. "My name is Lily of the Valley," said Victoria. Chrysanthemum did not think her name was absolutely perfect. She knew it. The epilogue to this story says, "Overall, the class musical was a huge success. Chrysanthemum was absolutely perfect as the daisy. Victoria made only one mistake. She completely forgot her lines as the dainty fairy queen. Chrysanthemum thought it was wildly funny, and she giggled throughout the entire dance of the flowers. Eventually, Mrs. Twinkle gave birth to a healthy baby girl, and of course, she named her Chrysanthemum." I love that story. So do you know anybody who is named after a flower? There are lots of people, or a number of people, who are named after flowers. I know some ladies whose names are Rose. We have a young woman here in our church, and her name is Daisy. So it's not terribly unusual for people to have names that are names of flowers. Chrysanthemum is a little unusual, but it was absolutely perfect for Chrysanthemum. So in our activity, or on our activity sheet for today, we have a couple of questions about the story. Like, for example, there are 13 letters in Chrysanthemum's name. How many letters are in your name? You might want to check out your whole family and see who has the name with the most letters and who has the name with the fewest letters. If you could pick the perfect name for you, what would it be and why? So there are some other good thinking questions that go along with the story. And then down at the bottom, there are some Bible verses about names. The Bible talks about names a little bit. In Proverbs chapter 22, verse 1, it says, "A good name is more desirable than great riches. To be esteemed is better than silver and gold." In other words, Solomon was saying that if you have a good reputation, a good name, that's better than being rich. And then there's another verse here for you to look at that talks about our identity in Jesus. So I hope you enjoyed the story about Chrysanthemum. And what you might want to do is ask your parents how they decided on your name. Where did you get your name? Maybe you're named after someone else in the family. There's kind of a fun story behind my name. So see if there's a fun story behind your name and why you were named what you were. So have a good day, and I'll see you back the next time.